Today, we're diving deep into one of the most haunting, glamorous, and emotionally complex love stories ever brought to television. Season 1, Episodes 1 through 3 of Love Story John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette, 2026. This isn't just a romance. This is a story about legacy, fame, obsession, identity, and two people who fell in love under a spotlight so bright it eventually burned everything. So grab your coffee because we're starting at the end. Episode 1, The Last Day. The series opens with silence. Not dramatic music, not flashing cameras. Silence. It's July 16th, 1999. John F. Kennedy Jr. walks out of his office at George magazine. He looks distracted, calm but distant. Across the city, Carolyn Bessette-Kennedy sits in a nail salon. She stares at her hands as bold red polish is removed and replaced with muted beige. That color change, it's symbolic. Red, passion, defiance, individuality. Beige, blending in, disappearing. Survival. They barely speak when they reunite. There's tension, something unresolved between them. We don't know what yet, but we feel it. They prepare to fly to Hyannis Port, and just before they board the plane, the screen cuts to black. Then the words 7 years earlier. And just like that, we're transported back to the early 90s, when this wasn't a tragedy, it was a beginning. The show makes one thing clear immediately. John is American royalty, the son of John F. Kennedy and Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. He grew up saluting his father's coffin on national television. He grew up as a symbol. But here in the 90s, he's not a prince. He's a man who just failed the New York bar exam, publicly. The tabloids are ruthless. Headlines mock him. Talk shows joke about him. To the world, he's supposed to be Camelot reborn. Instead, he's human, and that terrifies him. We see how desperately he wants to prove himself not as a Kennedy, but as John. Meanwhile, downtown Manhattan, Carolyn Bessette works in publicity at Calvin Klein. Minimalist suits, clean lines, quiet power. She's not chasing fame. She's crafting it, helping models like Kate Moss rise to stardom. Carolyn moves through New York anonymously, confident, effortless, sharp. And that's exactly what attracts him. Their worlds collide when Calvin Klein himself introduces them at an event. The chemistry is immediate. Not fireworks, not dramatic music, just recognition. But here's the complication. John is still entangled with actress Daryl Hannah. Carolyn is casually seeing model Michael Burgeon, so their connection lingers, unfinished. Episode 1 ends not with a kiss, but with longing. Episode 2, The Chase. If Episode 1 is destiny knocking, Episode 2 is temptation answering. John begins pursuing Carolyn quietly, thoughtfully. No grand Kennedy gestures, just presence. Coffee dates, walks, conversation. For the first time, we see him relaxed, not performing. And Carolyn? She's intrigued, but cautious, because she understands something John doesn't. Dating him means surrendering her privacy forever. When paparazzi first photograph them together, everything changes. The show slows down here. We feel her panic. Cameras don't just capture her image, they consume her identity. John, however, doesn't fully grasp it. He grew up inside this machine. The flashbulbs are background noise to him. But for Carolyn, they're invasive, violent. There's a powerful scene where she sees footage of Princess Diana being chased by photographers. The fear in her eyes says everything. This could be me. Meanwhile, John launches George magazine, determined to carve out something that belongs to him, not Camelot, not his father's shadow, his own legacy. But the more he builds his public life, the more Carolyn's private one erodes. Episode 2 ends with them officially becoming a couple, but the celebration feels fragile because now the whole world is watching. The Wedding and the War. Episode 3 is about transformation, specifically Carolyn's. The media becomes obsessive. Her clothes are dissected. Her weight is analyzed. Rumors begin immediately. Is she good enough? Is she too cold? Too thin? Too quiet? John proposes in private. No cameras. Just vulnerability. She says yes, and for a moment, it feels like a fairy tale. They plan a secret wedding, so secret that even many friends don't know. When they marry on Cumberland Island, it's intimate, sacred. And then, the photos leak. John kissing her hand outside the chapel becomes iconic, but what the public sees as romance, the show reveals as pressure. Marriage doesn't simplify things, it magnifies them. Carolyn moves into the Kennedy world, Hyannisport, political expectations, unspoken rules. She's no longer just Carolyn, she's a Kennedy wife, and that role comes with ghosts. We see her interactions with Jacqueline Kennedy's legacy lingering in every room. We feel the weight of comparison. John struggles too. He wants Carolyn to adapt, but he doesn't see how much she's sacrificing. By the end of episode 3, the cracks begin. Small arguments, missed signals, loneliness inside a crowded life. They love each other deeply, but love isn't protection. The episode closes on Carolyn standing alone in their loft, paparazzi lights flashing through the windows like lightning. And for the first time, we wonder, was this love strong enough to survive the myth? On the surface, it's a romance, but underneath, it's about identity versus expectation. John is trying to escape being a symbol. Carolyn is being turned into one. He was born into myth. She married into it, and neither of them fully understood the cost. The brilliance of these first 3 episodes is that the tragedy isn't the plane crash. The tragedy is watching 2 people slowly lose themselves under public ownership. By episode 3, we already know how it ends, but we're starting to understand why it hurt so much. Because they weren't just beautiful, they were human, and the world never let them be. Carolyn Bessette-Kennedy slowly disappears inside the Kennedy machine. Hyannisport becomes less of a summer retreat and more of a museum of ghosts. Portraits of John F. Kennedy stare down from the walls. Conversations revolve around legacy, politics, duty. Carolyn doesn't belong there, and she knows it. The show uses silence brilliantly here. She sits at long dinner tables, barely speaking. Every movement feels observed, measured, judged. She begins losing control over the one thing she once mastered, image. Now tabloids analyze her weight, her expressions, her rumored pregnancies, her alleged drug use, her attitude. The woman who once built brands at Calvin Klein is now being branded herself, and she hates it. This episode is the emotional climax of the series, and it's devastating. The Central Park fight, one of the most infamous paparazzi photos of the 90s. In real life, the image showed Carolyn pulling away while John grabbed her arm. The tabloids labeled it dramatic, volatile, dysfunctional. But the show reframes it. It isn't about anger. It's about desperation. Carolyn feels unheard. John feels helpless. They aren't fighting each other. They're fighting the pressure around them. The dialogue-heavy scenes here are raw. Carolyn finally says what she's been holding in for years. I didn't marry a country. And that line lands like a thunderclap, because that's exactly what she did. The final episode circles back to where we began, July 16, 1999. The emotional distance between them now makes sense. They're not divorced, they're not separated, but they are tired, exhausted from defending something the world constantly tries to own. There's a quiet reconciliation before they leave. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just two people who have been through too much. Carolyn changes into that beige nail polish again. It's subtle, but symbolic. She isn't fighting the spotlight anymore. She's enduring it. They head to the airport. The mood is uneasy. Weather reports warn of haze and limited visibility. John insists he can handle it. And here's the deeper metaphor. John has always believed he could navigate turbulence. He grew up in it. But this time, he's the one in control of the aircraft. No advisors, no dynasty, no public narrative, just him. The plane disappears over the Atlantic. The show does not dramatize the crash. No explosion, no chaos, just silence. Dark ocean, empty sky, and then headlines. The same media machine that stalked them in life now mourns them in spectacle. So when people remember John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette-Kennedy, they remember the glamour, the wedding photo, the tragic headline. But this series asks us to remember something else. Two people trying to protect something private in a world that profits from exposure. And maybe that's why their story still fascinates us, because it forces us to ask, was it destiny? Was it pressure? Or was it simply impossible to survive when the whole world believes you belong to them? And that is the real ending of Love Story.